This video is brought to you by Worlds of Aria. Want to experience the choice-driven thrills, betrayals, and hilarity of tabletop RPGs without all the setup? Then jump into Worlds of Aria, the cooperative RPG adventure full of twists, turns, and undoubtedly some natural ones to get your blood flowing. Choose from one of 12 characters and party with up to 3 of your friends via local or online multiplayer. Complete with a friend pass that only requires one person to own the game. Will you act together to try to solve the various fantasy scenarios, or embrace your inner wild card, betray them all at the last second, and possibly get uninvited to several upcoming weddings, birthday parties, and Arbor Day celebrations? Oh no. The choice is yours, but don't worry. You can replay scenes to discover their multiple endings and various secrets, so maybe Arbor Day is back on the table. Worlds of Aria launches on September 24th on PC, so head on over to the Steam page to learn more today. This video is brought to you by Worlds of Aria. Want to experience the choice-driven thrills, betrayals, and hilarity of tabletop RPG?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Windbreaker podcast. I'm Yahtzee Crowshaw. Sorry, I took a moment to remember there. Marty's there. And freshly back from the States and back in grimy old London town, or wherever he lives, is Jay.
Back in the green old hills of Devon. God.
Oh, yeah.
Right before we went live, you started slapping yourself in the face, Yahtzee, which I found really funny. Like that you psych yourself up before a podcast.
You don't. I mean,
I
you
like-
gotta
I slapped something, but
energy
it's not my
going.
face.
Yeah, it's great.
Gotta get the energy going.
Yeah.
The best tip I got for getting ready for doing a live chat is to warm up your face muscles. Either you slap yourself, or one thing that's good to do is you put your hand over your mouth and you sort of hum in a way that makes the entire front of your face vibrate.
Ooh. That feels weird though. Is that intentional for it to feel strange?
30 seconds
Well,
before
yes.
live on any stream, I eat a big corn dog. And that's what gives me the fuel to get through the stream.
During stream, I eat a big corn dog. I just have to do it secretively,
Yeah.
and that's
gets
what.
the super chats in.
Yeah.
I have a small corny dog
Ah!
named Toffee.
Oh, great dogs.
I'm back with Ludo. I miss Ludo. She's back.
Oh,
Oh, the
Yay.
pups.
Anyway.
pups. Great.
oh yes, we did have a topic.
We did.
And the topic is simply realism is overrated, which I think all of us have weighed in on this topic at various points in various different videos. The pursuit of 100% realistic graphics is, in my view, detrimental to video games and the AAA industry in
Agreed.
particular.
Yep.
Yep.
It's
And I
the the thing that drives the constant push for new consoles, which drives more and more games into the dustbin of history because you can no longer run the bloody things. And of course, there's the point that nothing ages faster than 100% realistic graphics. So really, you're just chasing a train that will always move on.
Upping development costs. It makes. I did a video on it on games are getting so pretty. It's ruined my job in the sense it makes even level designers' jobs infinitely harder. The more we push for that realism, it does a lot of bad, and I don't think a lot of players even respond to much of it yet. Because when did that stop? That kind of, it used to all be about, oh well, the PS3 can perform better than the Xbox 360, or like that was the argument in those bullshit console wars. When did that kind of shift stop? When did we start getting into gameplay as
think-
king?
feels
I think
to
it
me
stopped-
relatively recent.
Mm.
It
At least
stopped
in general
when
population.
it stopped when Xbox decided they were going to stop doing the console war thing and basically just make glorified gaming PCs, leaving only Sony by itself continuing the console conflict alone, while
it's,
Nintendo went off doing its own thing.
Yeah, it's funny because this, the last week or two we had the news of the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is going to be $700 this fall, and they showcased via a live stream that was streamed at or a video that was like 1080p, and it's like try to spot the graphical differences between 2020's Last of Us Part 2 on these two pieces of hardware, and sort of the tepid response to that, and then also just. It feels like every big AAA failure of the last couple of years, you look at it and you're like, this took 8 years a thing like Concord, a thing like Suicide Squad. And obviously, those were for different reasons. And live services, it's a whole bag of worms.
Well, there's always
but
going to be diminishing returns because, as I said, it stops it stops looking good after a while. It ages really poorly. I think Concord is a really good example of a game that definitely put its foot in it by going for 100% realism in graphics.
Yeah,
Because
and it's a huge part of it because my next script that I'm handing to you, Marty, after this that I finished is on Concord, and there's a section on the graphical fidelity and the fact that they went from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5. Mainly for a graphical leap, right? And I'm not sure at what point in development that happened, but that is a huge issue. And like you see the reveal of, say, Unreal Engine 5, and they did that massive tech demo with that woman in the desert, and it was beautiful, right? But the audiences still do respond to that, like, oh my god, Unreal Engine 5 can produce these crazy videos, like visuals and particles and stuff. And I think you're right, Yachts. Like Concord was pushing for that and trying to get that angle where in a hero shooter, that's not what sells or anything, right?
Yeah. I was watching a video this morning of a professional designer comparing the character design of Overwatch to the character design from Concord. And he was like, look at these Overwatch characters. They're larger than life. They're beautiful. They're exaggerated in exactly the way they need to be. The coloring is expertly set up. Or everything leads you to what you're supposed to be looking at. And then you got the Concord cast, which, part of it's the realism and part of it's the character design is just awful.
Yeah,
the colors clash. Everyone's covered in meaningless detail. But part of it is that they've also went for the realistic look, which really doesn't jibe with the sort of hyper real outfits all the characters were given.
And I want to be clear that this, at least from me, this is not a condemnation of games that strive for visual realism. We have The Last of Us Part 2 in the thumbnail. It's a game I love, and it's a game that I replayed earlier this year, a couple months ago maybe, and I don't
like it. I think it sucks.
I was still floored. I was still floored by its visuals, and I think its visuals do enhance both the storytelling and enhance the gameplay. Storytelling, obviously, in emotional cutscenes. Gameplay, I do think its stealth gameplay has a lot of mechanics that stem from its pursuit of realism that I think works really well. I would say a similar thing with Red Dead 2. I think Red Dead 2, that might be the other.
About to say Red Dead 2,
the two last games that I feel like have impressed me most with their quote unquote realism is Red Dead 2. Obviously the shrinking testicles, horse testicles and stuff is kind of, that feels a little silly, and it feels a little bit like, what are we doing here?
And that's the thing. That's all anyone brings up when you talk about Red Dead Redemption 2's push for realism. I think we're all broadly in agreement that the pursuit of absolute tippy top cutting edge graphics is detrimental. But I guess one of us needs to create some kind of argument, and so let me play devil's advocate a little bit here, and let's talk about what good things realism can do. And I think you've hit the nail on the head talking about Last of Us 2, talking about Red Dead Redemption. The one area in which realism is helpful is immersion. The more realistic you can make the game, the more realistic you make the physics, the more realistic you can make it feel, the more immersed the player can be.
Within a window, though, right? I think, as you were saying...
Well, as I say, there's always diminishing returns.
It ages, and then that window for it helping with immersion starts to shift. And I think that window starts to shrink over time, because a lot of games that were considered super realistic back in the day, you can play now and go, oh, like those physics are really jank, or, the way they've animated the faces don't kind of line up. Starts to take you out of the experience, but that's just it aging poorly. But when
do you want immersion? I'd say you only really care about immersion if you're in a strictly sort of narrative-based experience or atmosphere-based experience. If it's like a multiplayer shooter, most people don't give that much of a shit.
Yeah,
I mean, there are the sweaties who love their realistic, and maybe that's less visual realism and more of I want my bullet in my sniper rifle to have to fall the further it goes, because that's how guns work. Or I want to reload, my gun can jam if it gets wet. Or so. I don't know anything about guns. This is
honestly, that feels more like dick. It feels more like dick waving than anything else. So no, my knowledge of realistic military strategy is bigger than your knowledge of realistic military strategy, penis.
I think the Last of Us and Red Dead 2 are really good examples, and what kind of got me thinking about this before you mentioned it, Yachts, was the idea of, I think realism in graphical fidelity or say mechanical expression makes sense in a story that is trying to convey itself seriously and realistically, and trying to bring you into that mindset so that you don't have to think about specific things of like, oh, how are they rendering these characters in this cartoony or stylistic way. Like, the main thing you should be paying attention to in, say, The Last of Us 2 is the story and the emotions of the characters. And I think the realism, in a way, is creating a more transparent window for you to look through into the writing and stuff like that. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it helps. Again, this is also immersion, but one of, aside from those two games, I think one of the last games that really wowed me with its quote unquote realism was PT. And playing that game and getting in that hallway every time you're in that loop, like at the time, 10 years ago, that hallway looked photorealistic to me. It was one of the best looking things I'd ever seen.
I suppose that's pretty easy when you only need to render one fucking corridor and make the entire game out of it.
You don't have to make the actual game because you're gonna have a little divorce with your company. But I think that did really help with the terror of that game, of every loop of being like, shit, am I gonna round the corner and see scary jittery woman, or is there gonna be someone up in the balcony, or is someone talking behind me?
That game is certainly one that benefits from realism. Horror generally, I'd say.
Yeah. It's funny.
About atmosphere, I suppose.
That's a good way to put it. You don't need realism to make your atmosphere, but realism can be one of the ways of creating your atmosphere. It's to me, it feels like this striving for realism is ultimately about diminishing returns. There was like a tweet that went around a couple months ago where it was like, which of these games look the best? And it was like a close up on like the sort of eye face area of main characters. And it was like Aloy in Horizon 2 and Kratos and God of War Ragnarok, Ellie in The Last of Us or something. And it was like, you could see pores, you could see dimples, you can see eyelashes. And I'm like, I saw that and I'm like, if this is the reason games are taking 6 to 8 years, what if we don't do this? Like, it reminds me of I cook a lot, and there are certain things that I feel like are worth the time and effort of doing homemade, and certain things that aren't worth the time and effort. Like, I like making homemade pico de gallo salsa, like in good tomatoes, good onions, good cilantro, a little garlic, hot sauce, making my own pico. Tastes great. I tried making homemade hummus once. It was a giant pain in the ass, and I think the store one tastes better. So there's like certain things where I'm like, I think putting in the effort for one thing is worth it. I don't think putting the effort for the other thing is worth it.
Especially when a lot of the games you're talking about that have the characters with the ultra-realistic eyes and ultra-realistic ability to express emotions spend 90% of the time with that character facing away from the camera.
You look at their butt crouching in grass. Yeah.
As you stare at their butts. I mean, it's
but I think a comparison of all of those characters' asses in a line on Twitter would have been read very differently.
Still, it would have gotten some clicks.
That's very true. That's very true. I think a lot of it comes down to marketing. I think a lot of players and general consumers are starting to shift and say that they don't necessarily care about graphics. But it's one of the things I said years ago in my episode on why is AAA UI getting worse. It's because the UI of the game does not sell copies. The art and the design of the game artistically sells copies on a face value, and having your game made in Unreal Engine 5 and using ray tracing and particle systems and lighting and stuff like that is what's going to sell you on it in a trailer, along with glimpses of what the gameplay is like, which is one of the reasons I'm also sad that the era of the demo has gone and is kind of coming back now, thanks to like Steam Next Fest and stuff like that, because being able to get to play something is way more important. But unfortunately, visuals sell, and people are going to start. If the devs could put in $1 million into making their game feasibly look twice as good, that is going to sell a lot more copies than putting that money towards sound design and UI and gameplay systems and stuff like that, which is a shame, but it's true.
I think I once referred to the pursuit of realistic graphics as sort of gaming's Cold War, in that nobody agrees that the realistic graphics, the cutting edge graphics, are helping the game experience. That is make good games or even like necessarily sell good games, but everyone's sort of racing towards it anyway, in case someone else races towards it faster, and we end up in situations like with Forspoken, and more recently. I'd say Star Wars Outlaw suffers from this as well, where if a game that wants to occupy the AAA space is anything less than 100% realistic, then everyone calls it out. The audience is aiming for talks shit about it.
They'll take like a single screenshot, and even the most beautiful human on the planet, at the right moment, you take a picture of them, and they'll look weird. And that's what they do with like, look at this face, and it's like, well, when that becomes the like tent pole of this game's fucking sunk because of this single screenshot I took.
I guess it's a sort of microcosmic argument against the sheer amount of excess effort that goes into the game. I think there's validity in doing that, because it's sort of expressing the fact that look at all the work they put into this, and this was the result.
Mm-hmm.
I think that argument is making a good point, even though it seems a little shallow and
it depends how
facetious.
you frame it, right? Because we've been doing it. We've been talking a lot about graphical fidelity, but we've also spoken a little bit about mechanical and how specific mechanics work. And I saw a comparison on Twitter. I can't remember the exact comparison, but it was like, oh, in X AAA game you can't swim, but in this game from 10 years ago you can. And someone's response was like, you can't swim in Dark Souls, you can't swim in Elden Ring. Like all of your favorite games you can't swim in because it doesn't make sense to be able to swim. But somebody was trying to weaponize the fact you couldn't do this, this one thing, as meaning the game is shit. And people will always try and, grab these things to try and hurt the things they don't like.
Also, you know what sucks in most games? Swimming.
Yeah.
Most games do swimming badly. Yeah.
Of course, the pursuit of super advanced realistic graphics goes hand in hand with the pursuit of broadest possible gameplay experience, the world where you can do anything, which has led us to the rise of the Jiminy Cogthroat, too many game mechanics, not focusing on anything, AAA gameplay model.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, it's funny because if you look at like what the biggest, I think the last like biggest AAA game that took over everyone's lives felt like Elden Ring. And Elden Ring in no way, shape, or form would I say is realistic. In fact, I feel like FromSoft, the reason they're so prolific in terms of being able to release games at a steady pace is because they keep building on the same thing they have. Like there are animations that have existed in those games for 15 years that haven't changed, opening a double set of doors. Or
people use that. I remember when Elden Ring was coming out, people were comparing, a lot of the animations in Elden Ring are one-for-one copies from weapon animations from Dark Souls 3, and they utilized a few of the enemy animations and stuff like that, and people were trying to weaponize that as Elden Ring is shit and is a rehash and stuff like that. And it's like you said, they didn't waste development time remaking those things and put that time and money into other aspects like expanding the open world or making a couple more bosses or something like that. And for me, fucking do it, right? Like the general consumer is never going to notice those things. So just reuse it, just do it. That's why it's got to that.
Literally why reinvent the wheel? Like if it just works, put your time and effort towards something else. Make cool monsters, even though they also reuse monsters a lot.
I think I said in my realism video way back when, what would really impress me was if they managed to 100% realistically depict water in a video game. Like, so not just that it's got realistic ripples on it and it realistically refracts light as you look through it, but if you could literally scoop out some of it with a cup and put it in a different vessel and just keep doing that until there's no water left in the ocean.
Your PlayStation 5 would blow up.
Not a PlayStation 5 Pro though. $700.
No, it would blow up. You just see it at 60 FPS while it blows up. Like, well, here's a question for you two. What's your favorite in-game water? I've got mine.
I was really impressed by Sea of Thieves' water. Thieves
That's mine. I fucking love the Sea of Thieves shade, water shade.
Yeah,
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned it, yeah, it looks incredibly good.
Waves were great looking, and it did a little bit. Obviously, it was much more like binary, but it did the hull's taken in hull. Is that what a ship is called? Whatever.
Yeah.
It's taken in water, and you got to scoop it out. And it wasn't like realistic scooping, but the mere fact that you had to think about that, I thought was
that realistic scoop.
that realistic scoop where all it takes is 3 scoops, so we're good.
The longest time they couldn't even like have a player like realistically traverse from being over the water to under it. Like you go, from the first person perspective, the water would go up, 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 and then it would just go bam, just jump to the top of your view, because they couldn't have the water level like transition up through your view.
A lot of that's to do with animations and stuff, right? When you think about the fact that the shader of the water's surface is moving so turbulently, right? If it was actually mirrored exactly, it would look incredibly jank, right? You need that transition. I agree with you though; it does feel weird, but there's a lot of things we do in games for a technical limitation that we have to do, or it will feel even worse. Like it will just look worse. And now they've just become, it's things that we do in every game.
It's funny to me that games. There are a lot of games. Some of the games that have the most impressive individual realistic element are the games that are not realistic by and large. Like when you said water,
to bring up Astrobot?
I'm going to bring up Astrobot. To get there, when you talked about water, Mario Sunshine has incredible water. Like that is, and that's like the core thing of the game. But that is not a realistic game by any measure. But how it thought about water and used water throughout the game felt realistic in a way that games at the time didn't feel. Astrobot, the same thing. Like for all of these games that are taking 8 years to develop and striving for photorealism, in Astrobot, when you pull a cord and 200 acorns fall on you, and you can run around the acorns and spin, and the acorns go flying, and you can feel them on the controller. Yeah. Like I was grinning like an idiot because I was like, "That's cool." I have not seen anything like that in a game, and that game is again not realistic whatsoever. But it really. It sort of scratched that same itch in my brain.
It's Particles the game.
Yeah, it is Particles the game.
But I think part of that is a lot of games that attempt to be realistic are attempting to be realistic in the same sense that... So I'm going to speak about this from a sound designer's perspective. Sound is meant to go unnoticed. You're meant to see a beach ball bouncing on the ground and hear the sound it makes and think to yourself, nothing, because that is the sound that beach ball makes. You're not meant to go, that is a good sound effect, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's different with graphical fidelity. A lot of the games that are attempting to be realistic in the sense of like Last of Us and stuff like that are doing it in a way where they're trying to emulate real life, so you don't notice that it is a pretty game, right? You're just meant to take it in and soak it in like sound. But with Astrobot, they are dropping those acorns on you so you can visually see that you're getting to interact with so many physics items and revel in it and notice it and feel good, rather than, say, those pretty games which are just meant to fly under the radar and be like, this looks nice and looks real. And I think games that lean into it and go, look at what we're doing, like, isn't this a good use of the technology, a good use of the power of your machine? That's more entertaining to the general audience, rather than, oh, the horse's balls shrink, or the main character has a load of paws, right? You're never going to really notice that until someone points it out.
You know what you've made me think of is the character animation in the old Free Radical games on the PS2, Time Splitters, Second Sight, games like that. Because these games had like pretty typically low grade graphics for the era. But they put a lot of effort into the facial animation, to the character animation, to their gestures. And those characters come across incredibly alive, if not realistic. And you can really get a sense of characterization from them. And so it makes you wonder, why put all the effort into looking 100% realistic if when those games illustrate that if you just do just enough, then you can pull it off.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take you out, right?
No. It looks really good. You look at a character and you go, I like this character, and I understand how they are feeling,
and I'm having fun, right?
Yeah.
This is fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny too. I feel like there were so many
Mm.
throughout every generation. There were like moments and lines of demarcation where I was like, "Ooh, this is the first time I've seen something look like." The first time I saw Donkey Kong Country, and I was like, "Whoa, look! This character looks 3D, even though it's on a Super Nintendo." Or like, even like games that used not is it rotoscoped? Like what did like Prince of Persia use? The
That's
early Prince of Persia,
rotoscoping, yeah.
rotoscoped. Yeah, used rotoscope movement or the day-night cycle in Ocarina of Time, or people's schedules in Majora's Mask, or even like Shenmue being like, go into this arcade and you can play an old arcade game. And I was like, wow, these little things are like really impressive. Or shooting like in Metal Gear Solid 2, where you could like shoot a container of liquid and the liquid comes out of it. Like really, really impressive small things that I just don't feel like we get at the same tick anymore, even though I'm sure Horizon Forbidden West is doing a million things under the hood that are crazy impressive, but maybe it's just like a sensory overload and I'm just not appreciating any of it. It's like the difference between having like one little dessert that's incredible and then being like, here's infinite dessert forever, and it losing its luster.
It's the sound design thing, right? It's
Yeah.
million things Forbidden for Horizon Forbidden West. I don't know what the fucking game's called.
I think so.
Like you said, a million things happening under the hood, but they're all being done in service to emulate realistic interactions with the world, right? So there could be systems that make the foliage move and wither in realistic ways, but because that's how it should work, your brain doesn't compute it as something as being impressive. That's just how it should work. It should be making that sound, right? You're not meant to notice it. But like we spoke about it, I think it was last week on Windbreaker or the week before, where we were talking about I spoke about the mud in Red Dead 2, or like you spoke about the sand in Wukong and stuff like that. Those things are super impressive because they are immediately noticeable as things that haven't really been done in a lot of games because they're so hard to process.
Yeah.
We're just not seeing enough of them, right? Because they're just too good. That's a problem. They're just too good nowadays.
Yeah.
They're going unnoticed.
Yeah. Also, can we talk about the fact that Yahtzee's camera froze while his eyes were closed, so it looked like he was asleep? He is not asleep. His camera is frozen, and he's currently off Discord, which I think is very funny. That is extremely funny.
I didn't even notice that. Amazing.
Yeah, that's really fucking good. Yeah, I just don't like. I feel like there was an error. There wasn't. Are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, it was funny. God. Your camera froze while you were blinking and your eyes were closed, and everyone in chat assumed you just went to sleep.
No, my computer's internet just mysteriously stopped working, but I rebooted and now it is fine.
We can see your camera. I think we need to see your camera. We'd like to see your big, beautiful face.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to see you with your eyes open, honestly. Yes.
You know what's it's funny is again we were talking about like small. Your camera's weird at a weird angle now too.
Must have nudged it.
One of the real quote unquote realistic moments from this year that impressed me was in Animal Well, which is a game that's like 50 megabytes big, but just the way like little lights and lanterns will sway when you hit them, or even when you throw your frisbee and it gets caught in some of those kind of like the dangly weeds or the seaweed, and like and I was like, man, that's like really impressive. It's like a game that is not realistic whatsoever, handling an interaction in a realistic way that surprised me, that I really liked. So I guess you can get little moments of realism in non-realistic games.
Well, whenever absolutely everything is realistic, the details tend to get lost, as we've noted. I mean, the whole history of video games has been the pursuit of getting to the point we're at now, where everything can be so detailed. And now we're in an era where the more noticeable games are the ones that focus on one or two little things and just focus on doing them as well as possible, rather than just trying to do the all-across smorgasbord approach. I mean, the games that have really caught people's attention lately has all been shit like indie games like Celeste or Balatro, indie games like Celeste or Neon White, which just focus on one like platforming mechanic and do it really well. Astrobot, which is a very old school platformer once you get past the particle physics that it's so fond of. I mean, they could literally step out of the middle of the Wii era right down to the shitty controller gimmicks.
Hey, sometimes you have to blow on your controller to make the little pinwheels move and to create an interaction. I think that was my one bridge too far, is having to blow on the controller.
I was gratified that I can go into the options and shut off the fucking controller motion controls, but it wouldn't let me shut off the fucking blowing in the mic controls.
It wouldn't let you go in and turn off blowing in the options.
I know.
You're the blow.
Again, it felt like something that come out of the Nintendo Wii. Terrible controls, options, and all.
I feel really sorry for like systems designers and people who make engines and stuff, because I haven't played Last of Us 2 yet, but am I right in saying they do some interesting stuff with rope? Like rope goes...
Yeah, there's some real good rope physics.
Yeah. Is it used much?
Notice.
No, this used in like 2 or 3 puzzles. Oh, it's really impressive.
Yeah.
Those 2 or 3 puzzles.
I've seen it, and it is incredibly impressive. But part of me, if I was on that team, and I know they have a lot of money to be throwing around, but if it's only used in a couple puzzles, and I know how difficult it would have been to actually make those things and get them working, I wish somebody would have just said, just remove the rope puzzles. Like, do something else, because this is going to cost millions of dollars to make this thing that only a handful of people are going to appreciate. It's worth not doing it. Right?
My thought with that was always Sony has an unfortunately named internal team called ICE, ICE, and I don't know what ICE stands for, but it is it's all about like sharing technology between their internal studios. Yeah. It's always my thought with a thing like that was like, oh, they're going to share the rope tech with everyone else, and then we're going to get sick ass ropes in all these first party games. I haven't really seen any cool ropes in any other games, so I don't know what's going on there.
Well, I had a problem with
I think ICE stands for internal combustion engine. Anyway, I remember the first time I saw a rope in a video game. I think it was Half-Life Opposing Force, and it was incredibly jank. But they were saying, hey, they had a whole section of the tutorial saying, hey, you can climb it and you can swing on it, and it's incredibly jank, but it's here. And I was like, yay, we are living in the future.
I want a game to focus on it. Do you remember when we all played Chain Together, and some of their interactions would require you to get stuck on... Like, some things had physics attachments, so we could get like stuck on them if we didn't communicate, and some things didn't. I would have preferred that game infinitely more if it was jank, but every single object had chain interactions, and we had to think about all of that. Right.
So I guess instead of realism, it's consistency.
Consistency is king for sure.
Yeah. Like a 2D tethering game. Like what's the one with the 2 penguins?
Bread and Fred.
Bread and Fred. Yeah. Or,
why is that in my brain? Why do I remember that?
I don't know.
I don't like when I look at the games on the horizon, even like for the rest of the year. Like the ones I'm excited for are like the new Zelda game and Metaphor ReFantazio, and like it's not really the like pushing the boundaries of visuals. This is going to be the thing that's going to get you to spend $700, and I don't know what the next like thing like that is. Like maybe Grand Theft Auto, but Grand Theft Auto even usually isn't, at least Grand Theft Auto 5, which I guess was over a decade ago, wasn't like photorealistic. It was just, look how much we can do here.
It's scale, it's not fidelity.
Yeah.
The next thing that's going to excite you, Marty, is going to be another game like Animal Well that does one thing really well. That's what's exciting now. Because we've seen the things that go all out, and all we get out of it is games standing up in a bush with their trousers down, wiggling their testicles back and forth, and charging us extra money for additional testicle physics.
I thought that was the horse, and I was like, is the horse wearing pants and in a bush, showing us his little testicles?
That's why most people didn't notice, because you had to take the pants
I was talking metaphorically.
Oh, shit. One of Yachtzee's famous metaphors.
Metaphor ReFantesticles.
Yeah. It was, a ReFantestical metaphor right there.
The game that's going to get me is going to be Rope the Game. I'm looking forward to that.
Well, you could just play Cut the Rope. That's got pretty good rope physics.
I want to be able to loop the rope around things and pull and tug.
You joke. Shit like Where's My Water had really impressive water physics.
I know, because it was 2D. And
it did one thing.
Do that. What I want is some kind of 3D particulate water system, as like what Where's My Water has, so you can put it in a 3D game.
I feel like that's gonna be real difficult.
I mean, I'm sure the square cube law is in play here, meaning that it's going to be like a million times more graphically intensive. But what's the point of all these fancy graphics cards if we've talked about the square cube law?
No, me?
Yeah.
It's where,
It was in Windbreaker.
we talked about how doubling something in size multiplies its volume by 8.
3D and design.
I didn't realize that was what it was called. Great.
Shall we go to super chats? There's a lot to get through.
Yeah, we got some good ones, and there's a couple points I specifically didn't mention because I saw the super chats come in, and I wanted to jump off those.
Alex Armstrong gives $2 and says, immersion's good when it adds. Example, Silent Hill Fog. That's a good example to bring up because, of course, the Silent Hill Fog is a beautiful example of games working within limitations.
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason why Silent Hill had fog because they couldn't render very much of the game environment on the PlayStation 1 or indeed the PlayStation 2 with the kind of graphical fidelity Silent Hill 2 had. So they had to reduce the visibility to 6 feet, but then they added fog effects, and it was one of the most atmospheric games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Now the fact is, games are getting stale in the realistic sector because we don't have enough limitations anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny to go back to the games that still look good from that. I think pre-rendered backgrounds still look really good because they were limitations, and it was here's the pre-rendered backgrounds of the Resi 2 Police Station or Resident Evil Remake, some of the most gorgeous.
Same with map paintings in movies, right? There's a charm to having a limitation and having to think creatively. And some of the best, can't think of any examples right now, but I'd love to. This would be a really good semi-Ramblo topic, Yards, of limitations in games. Find some good examples of there's lots of things in games where those mechanics and those interactions only exist because of either a limitation or an accident while making it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that spun into it being a core gameplay mechanic or one of your favorite things about the game, like Silent Hill 2.
That's one of the things I have very low expectations for the Silent Hill 2 remake, because so much of what made Silent Hill 2 good was unintentional and was a consequence of the process of designing it and having to cut corners.
Yeah, it's
I'm one of those people who thinks that the voice acting being slightly off and slightly out of sync really adds to the sort of atmosphere of surreality.
Mm.
And even that's a whole separate debate of survival horror. Are quote unquote bad controls good? Do they help? The sort of the fear and the tension, and that's what the original Resi and Silent Hill was sort of you feel like a Silent Hill especially, you're kind of like a bumbling fool.
Yeah,
it's you're not used to this. Whereas in Resi, it's you're special ops, so you should probably be able to kill these things. But helps them.
The worst thing Silent Hill Homecoming did was give you a dodge roll.
Yeah.
Why am I fucking dodge rolling in Silent Hill?
Yeah.
Who the fuck am I? Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, don't get me started, mate.
Anyway, Dale Mallows gives $2 and says, real eyes, realize, real lies. Say that 10 times fast.
Hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. Think about it.
Dr. Theo gives $5 and says, realism does not equal realistic. It isn't realistic that a single fire arrow melts at a huge ice block in Breath of the Wild, but you apply realism logic to solve that puzzle.
Yeah, those are little things that, by no means does Breath of the Wild look realistic, but the fact that your fire can burn through a field of grass and have actual an impact on encounters and the environment and puzzles and stuff tickles that realism center of your brain.
Yeah,
it's more immersion, I suppose. More immersion than realism, in that it's the qualities of the immersive sim. Sure. In that you have multiple tools in your arsenal, and you can find the route that works for you.
Yeah, I guess immersive sims, that's another genre that has those kind of dips into realism without being entirely, realistic top to bottom. More of if you can think it, you can do it.
Yeah. King Dead 42 gives $5 and says, Jacob Geller had a good video, the best looking game ever, a couple of weeks back discussing this topic. Yes, I saw that. His point was that Hellblade 2 is the best looking game he's ever played, and he doesn't really like it. And he was sort of interrogating their reaction.
Yeah. Also, Jacob Geller's great. Everyone should watch his videos.
Yeah, big ups, Jacob Geller.
Yeah. Come on the podcast sometime, Jacob Geller.
The pod.
You fuck.
if you just keep saying friend of the pod, they're ultimately a friend of the pod. Like Kojima, friend of the pod.
Well, I don't think any of us know him personally. That's how we've gotten all our previous guests on.
No, but if he sees a compilation of us saying friend of the pod 50 times.
One person who doesn't need to abide by the make your games less realistic rule is Kojima. He could do whatever he wants.
Yeah, at this point, we have a sort of sense of sort of fascinated car crash fascination sort of vibes.
But like,
I really want to see what he comes up with now.
Of his thing, like his whole storytelling and conveying that narrative is what impresses most people about his games, and that surrealness, not necessarily that look, Snake's balls are shrinking.
Well, it's because he makes games that feel like they are auto-driven. They come from one person's insane mind.
I mean, I think like the act of walking in Death Stranding, like that's the most realistic walking I've ever played in a game. I've never had to carry that much shit. I don't like carrying anything, but if I did, I imagine it'd be like what Sam has to go through.
Hey, we've all had to get shopping out of the car in as few trips as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
We all instinctively have our own strategies for that.
Yeah.
Like tuck the case of beer under the arm, hold the lightest bag in the same hand.
Going from car to the house is a Stranding type experience.
Yes.
The original Strand game is bringing in all your groceries in a few trips possible.
Dale Mallows gives $2 and says, "What's the best game with realistic graphics?" Silent Hill 2. Next question. Realistic for the time. Games that were shooting for realism up to the standard of the time they were made.
Red Dead Redemption 2, I think.
Last of Us Part 2. Yahtzee agrees.
No, I don't.
Oh, sorry.
Stop putting your disgusting vinegary words in my mouth.
My mistake. Do you not like fish and chips with a little vinegar?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you don't like pickles, dude?
I don't drink vinegar by itself.
I drink pickle juice by itself, like a little fucking goblin in the kitchen. Absolutely.
Dr. Theo goes $5 and says, "Heard you like to read the lore of the original killers in Dead by Daylight. What's your favorite original killer?" Mine's the unknown. I guess mine's the nurse, Dr. Theo, because it makes me think of Silent Hill 2 again.
I was going through this with Jess the other day, like going through some of the killers, and they're all called like, they've got so many like crazy licensed characters that even ones that I thought, wow, I'm impressed you've got these. But they're all called like the something, and they've renamed them to fit that convention, and it just it looks like they don't have the rights, but
Pyramid
they
Head's
do.
called the Executioner, and
Oh, it doesn't even call him the what's Pyramid Head's actual name in Silent Hill 2?
Well, he's got a few names. The game refers to him as Pyramid Head, the Red Pyramid Thing.
Red Pyramid Thing. That's what I was thinking.
Various. Well, they do. The game does call him Pyramid Head at the end.
Yeah.
After you defeat them in the final boss fight, if you examine their bodies, James says, "Pyramid Head isn't moving anymore, like a little child who misses his toy."
My God, yeah.
Yeah, Dead by Daylight. Weird game. Just licenses everything that returns its phone calls.
Oh, I have a video, an entire video planned on my irrational beef with that game, but we'll see when that
Have you
comes out.
played
Dead by Daylight?
Have you played the casting of Frank Stone?
No, I haven't even heard of it.
Single player game. That's like the choose your own adventure kind of.
Yeah, it's by Supermassive, the Until Dawn and Dark Pictures anthology guys, but it's a Dead by Daylight. It's set in the Dead by Daylight universe, and it sort of sets up the situation in Dead by Daylight.
That sounds fun, because all of the issues I have with Dead by Daylight are all just like mechanical and interaction based things. So actually getting to explore having multiple horror icons in a more not point and click, but choose your own adventure kind of style thing sounds.
Oh, it doesn't feature any of the established Dead by Daylight characters.
Oh, the OG ones like Big Man and Creepy Woman and
it introduces its own killer character who I assume is going to be added to the base game at some point. But it doesn't reference Pyramid Head or any of the non-original characters.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
horror immediately starts to lose its luster when lore gets involved. When you
Well,
got
you
Michael
can.
Myers lore,
Michael
Halloween
Myers
starts
is
to
the
lose its
example of that.
luster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, part of the attraction of horror is the unknown, I suppose. I
Yeah.
complained about this when I was talking about Amnesia Rebirth, because there's the whole sections of that game where you go to the dark universe, open quotes, and it sort of takes the lid off the mystery of the horror that's existed in that series up to that
Mhm.
point. Anyway, let's not get bogged down on this question. There's lots to go through. The Bad Thing gives $5 and says Crisis was peak realism hype. There's a reason the Can It Run Crisis meme still exists. Red Dead Redemption 2 might be the only other that had as much of an impact. IMO.
I was not a PC gamer I mean, I'm still not. But was Crisis like? Did you play Crisis when it came out? Either of you? And was it that like? Holy shit!
Yes, I reviewed it when it
Right.
came out, and I remember being impressed by it. Specifically, the bit where you first go into the alien ship and you see all these weird blue crystal formations, and I remember thinking, "My golly gee, this is some impressive graphics tech."
Mhm.
Yep.
Although going back to it, it would probably not look as good as it did at the time.
Sure. Like you
I
said,
think-
striving for photorealism
Yeah.
doesn't
Yes.
age well usually.
A lot of it as well is people would, again, just like with the console war bullshit, just use it as a weapon of just like, can your PC run Crisis? That was the benchmark. Like, your PC isn't good enough unless it can run Crisis.
Talk about willy waving. Yes.
Yeah, it was all just
Oh,
a
it
willy
almost
waving
became like
competition.
the meme, or like, I mean, I guess, or was it true? Like, was it like actually used as like a baseline for
Yes,
you're building a
because it
PC,
was
or-
very difficult to run
Pretty
because it
much.
was really, really stunning.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see if they're doing a Crisis 5, right? 4?
Oh, what are we up to
6?
now? It depends what you count
There's
as a
been
full
3
game.
for sure. I remember
Yeah,
Crisis.
there's
Yeah,
been-
I've played the third one. I just don't know if there was a 4th.
We're up to Crisis 3 in numbered sequels, but there have been a couple of spin-offs, I think.
Oh yeah,
What was
Crisis
the one that's
Jimmy Fallon's Nightmare.
yeah, like the first game had a spin-off with like the British dude called Crisis something or other.
James Corden.
Warhead. Crisis Warhead it was called.
Crisis
I've been
Warhead,
4,
yeah.
but there was Warhead. Gotcha.
So yeah, 4. So hopefully, I don't know, is 4 going to come out and be another graphical shit fest where people are like,
Probably
you're,
not.
you're not a real PC gamer unless you can run Crisis 4?
You know, this is partly why I think Half-Life 3 hasn't happened, because Half-Life 1 and 2 were both sort of quantum leaps for PC gaming technology, and I just don't think Valve would do a Half-Life 3 unless it could also be a similar quantum leap, and I'm not sure such a thing is possible at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I guess VR was the closest thing there, but it's such a small audience.
It was too nichey in the end.
Yeah.
Anyway, Fox D gives $5 and says, even among realism lovers, sometimes realism is annoying. SCS tightened up the left turn rules in ATS 1.51 and the bug report forum lit up for a week. Now, who knows what the fuck this person's talking
What
about?
the fuck?
I don't know what SCS is. I also don't
I
know
need
what
to go look at that. Who did that one again?
Fox D said that. SCS tightened up the left turn rules in ATS 1.51.
Chat, please.
Left turn rules? So a driving game? Is that what that is?
SCS, sports car suckers.
Please chat, please.
Please, our family, they need to eat. Truck simulator. Someone just said a truck
What?
simulator.
Oh, American Truck Simulator. That's what ATS.
Oh, American
and
Truck
SCS
Simulator.
Right, ATS is the developer, I assume.
Okay.
SCS.
I'm gonna say
uh,
if we as a society are gonna use acronyms, you got to make sure that the audience knows what that is, because that is an acronym that only people who play that know what it is.
Yeah. Dimitri gives $5 and says, realism. Reminds me of when Dev Diary viewers missed the point of something's in the sea, camera zoom in when you're close to the surface. Yes, I did an episode of Dev Diary when I was making my Something's in the Sea game. Because I was saying that I wanted the game, like your visibility, to expand the deeper down you swum. And all the comments were like, wait, wouldn't it be more realistic for visibility to get poorer the deeper you go? And I was like, yes, that would be more realistic, but it wouldn't work for the game I'm trying to make. To piss off.
Yeah.
Piss off. It's funny going back to the truck simulator thing, which I was thinking of, is it feels like racing games, sports games, and I guess now flight sims, like Microsoft Flight Sim, like that seems to be the one area where everyone's like, okay, I guess the only thing we could do here is continue to make it look better.
Yeah, because
Or
mechanically they are about realism, right? And they have kind of
Yeah.
nearly peaked
Yeah.
at that, apart from using
that's-
actual
yeah.
racing and
Yeah.
That's what
you know.
that's what the audience of truck sim and train simulators want, because the audience is like retired truck drivers and train drivers and dads,
He is my favorite retired truck driver.
and they're the ones who are buying all these like $1,000 DLCs to have like super realistic versions of real life trains and trucks in the game.
I don't understand. I don't think a retired truck driver would play the truck driving game. Wouldn't they just keep truck driving so they could get paid?
My dad was a retired train engineer, and he had a model train set in the loft.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah, it's just like wallowing in nostalgia for one's glory days, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. Hairy Sun 94, member for 10 months in Tip Jar. Thank you very much. Blank, member for 9 months in the Green Gang, who says, P.S. pre-rendered backgrounds were a perfect balance. Oh, yes, like you just said. Marty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought they were great.
I do quite like that game Crow Country that tried to create the vibe of a
I wanna play
pre-rendered
that,
backdrop with a very simple 3D model over the top of it, even though everything was fully rendered
Yeah.
3D.
It does that smart thing that it feels like what you remember it being like. It doesn't emulate exactly what it was like, but it like taps into what your memory of it is, which is kind of better and less cumbersome than it actually was.
love
Robo
it.
Not the Snob gives €10 and says, I wish realism was in service of the game's themes. Realistic in animations and physics in SOTC.
Shadow of the
Great.
Colossus.
Make the feeling. So thank you. Yes, Shadow of the Colossus. Great. Make the feeling of being small and weak even stronger. Red Dead Redemption 2. I could barely notice narrative-wise.
But that's the point in Red Dead 2, right? Like,
Realism certainly helped Shadow of the Colossus, giving you the sense of the bigness of the things you were fighting.
Scale.
Quite impressive that they pulled it off on the PlayStation 2, actually.
extremely.
Yeah, all three of their games, Eco, Shadow of the Colossus, and Last Guardian, have a ton of those little like Eco. Just like the hand-holding mechanic is something I'd never seen in a game before, where you there's a button to hold Yorda's hand, and when you're running around away from shadows, you go to a bench, and the two of you sit on a bench, and you save, and when the save is done, like she's fallen asleep and her head's on your shoulder, and I'm like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in a game. Realism is peaked. No reason to make it.
Did you find them all in Astrobot?
I did, yeah, including the big one who's there, which is very good.
Yes.
Is 2001 where realism peaked? Now that I'm thinking, 2001 had Silent Hill 2, it had Metal Gear Solid 2, it had Eco, and it had Grand Theft Auto 3. Did realism
I've said in the past, gaming kind of generally peaked in the PS2 era, because it was the point when there wasn't such a huge gulf between indie and AAA design. It was the point where the technology was capable of realizing most visions for game design without being too out of the reach of lower level developers.
And even AAA felt like a lot of big companies were just families that were making the same things just better over and over, rather than being swapped from company to company and getting laid off a bunch in service of small profit margins and stuff like that.
Yeah,
just a better time probably in all industries. Let's be real.
It was also around the time for peak PC first-person games, because that was like a year after Deus Ex.
Yeah.
Tsunami Dusha gives $20 and says, personal motto in design, don't be realistic, just be convincing.
That's a really good word, convincing. Yeah.
Convincing,
that is a good
consistent.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what, like, a movie that tricks you that what you're seeing is real. There you go.
Immersive. I'm telling you, that's the word.
Yeah.
Doran Grossman Nipples gives $5 and says, like most things, it comes down to intention. Is realism a deliberate artistic decision, or are you just doing it because that's what everyone does? Quite. I mean, you're making me think of, the sort of cheapo Unity acid flips these days that have these beautifully rendered lighting and environment engines and beautifully rendered characters pissing about on like a blank green field with like a boxy house on it.
Yeah, or even those like we're seeing a bunch of those like body cam shooters that are like are photorealistic, and it kind of looks like I think a few came out earlier this year. You might have tried one of them at some point, but it's
I
like
played pools. You're making me think of
pools,
pools.
yeah, where it's like this is like I guess as like a GIF, it looks realistic, but then you're like, I guess there's the difference. It's almost like the museum thing where Astro's Playroom, it's things in the environment feel like someone described it as a pile of leaves, like jumping into a pile of leaves as a kid. It's very interactive and tactile. Whereas I would say a game like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which has some gorgeous places you go to and visit, feels like a museum. It's very look but don't touch. You're not really doing anything there. You're kind of just
and like I was saying earlier, you said it there. It looks good in a GIF or a screenshot because that's what's going to sell copies.
But which is why a lot of those games exist.
I like when a game has a really reactive environment. I remember people praising like the Luigi's Mansion games because basically everything in the environment reacts to being sucked and being blown and being messed around with.
I'll stand by it. Luigi's Mansion 3 has the best animations in any game I've ever seen ever.
Yeah.
Like it's immaculate, and a lot of it is how Luigi navigates and moves around the environment and reacts to things. It's so stretch and pull, like this cartoony non-realistic animation style, but it just sells the emotion and the world so well, and the way like your your little Hoover and the ghosts interact with the world makes it feel more cohesive and solid.
And everything you point the Hoover at least rattles when you point the Hoover at it, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So good.
Anyway, Jackson Jewell, member for 10 months in the Green Gang, says, "Hi all, finally caught another one live."
Welcome, Jackson.
Yeah.
And then RoboNob the Snob gives €10 and says, "The Last of Us 2's insane animations were great to emphasize the whole brutality of the game world. Can't say the same about Hellblade 2. The gritty, grimy graphics maybe were a mirror of how shit the game is." Well, Hellblade 2 certainly feels like a look but don't touch kind of game.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But that is one of those games where there was a couple rocks in that game where I'm like, why don't they just sell these rocks to every other developer? Because there's no need to, like, this is the best rocks are ever going to look. And no one should have to make their own rocks anymore because they've like made the rocks.
But what if I want to make a stylized game? Your rocks are no good to me.
No. Right click, save as rock, cell shading. Rock dot cell shader.
Oh yeah, okay. Just change the file name. That's all you need to do.
I never made a game. I assume it's that easy.
Snake in the Garden gives €2 and says, what food are you best at cooking? Well, my wife usually does the cooking, but she makes a special point of leaving it to me when it comes to steaks.
You're a good steak man.
Yeah, she doesn't even try anymore. She's like, "Oh, we've got steaks, so I'll leave that to you." I mean, I say to her, I could write down all my steps, and she just says, "No, I've tried following your steps. It never works for me. You are the one with the steak instincts. You are the steak guru in this house."
The steak guru.
What a masculine thing to be good at cooking.
It's not that hard. You pat it dry, you sprinkle on salt and pepper, give it a little rub so to work the seasoning into the fibers of the meat. Drop it onto a very hot pan. Make sure it's very hot before you drop it in so you get a good sear. A few minutes either side. Make sure you sear every side. If it's a big thick bit of steak, finish it in the oven. Bam. Lovely steak.
How do you have your steaks?
Medium.
Okay.
Like
for me, I like to make quite a lot of pasta dishes, but I tend to make a lot of my sauces from scratch rather than like store buying stuff. I've lived with someone who was a chef, like a Michelin star chef, for years, and I'm in no way anywhere near as good as him. I will always have him cook if I can, but he's taught me how to make a lot of sauces and like how to properly season stuff. So my favorites are like my pasta dishes and stuff like that, or chili. I really like chili.
Ooh, I like a good chili. I think I make the best tuna salad I've ever had in my life.
Ooh, that sounds nice.
King of tuna.
Well, there you go. Dale Mallows gives $5 and says, "When did Nintendo drop out of the Cold War? I remember them being competitive back in the N64 days, but I was also 10 and even stupider than I am now."
The Wii.
I think they stopped being graphically competitive around the Wii era, when the Wii was famously described as just two GameCubes glued together. because they were very decisively decided to focus on game design and the motion controls at the time. The motion controls eventually sort of dropped off, but they still are more heavily design focused as a company.
Were they doing
And
that with the GameCube? Right, like was the GameCube considered a competitor for the PS2 and
Yeah,
and
I mean,
stuff
it
like
had
that?
Resident Evil 4, which was arguably one of the best looking games of that generation. So
it had
True.
it had stronger graphics tech than the PS2 did, and the
Yeah.
But was that
controller
part of
was
his marketing of like, look at how good we look
not
and stuff? 'Cause
necessarily, but there were a lot of
the whole bit era kind of stopped after N64 and
there was
Yeah.
there were a lot of games ported to PS2, Xbox, and GameCube because they all had basically the same controller.
yeah.
So
I
I
think it
think
was
the
also
GameCube
around the-
was
Go ahead.
I mean there was the whole mini disc thing, but the GameCube was
Bloody
it did
amazing.
feel like it was trying to compete with the rest of the industry still at that point.
I think it was around the time of the Wii that Nintendo made it a point that they would not lose money on hardware, which is why the Wii U, and the Switch, even when they released, felt underpowered compared to competitors, is because while PlayStation and Xbox tend to, especially in the opening years of a console, lose money on hardware sales, Nintendo doesn't. They make a profit on hardware.
Yeah.
Super Switch coming soon.
There you go. Cadmon Alima gives $5 and says, I'm fine with can't swim, but I take issue with can't sit. All games that go for immersion need to allow you to sit. Why, Cadmon Alima?
I
mean,
have
you
this
just-
yeah.
I mean, you're just gonna do nothing and then get up again when you're bored.
It's consistency for me always. So an example of this was I was at a one of the university events, the uni I used to work at. The students were showing off games and showing off their final year projects, and I was brought in to judge some of them and give feedback and stuff like that. And there was this one really stunning environment that this student had made, and I was exploring it as the character, walked up to a ladder, and then couldn't go up the ladder. And I was like, oh, I can't go up the ladder. And they were like, yeah, it's just it's just there. And I'm like, why have you decided to put a ladder here if you can't go up it? And they're like, well, it makes sense for the world. There's like, the ladder would be here. And I was like, okay, well then why can't I go up it? And they're like, well, I have to make that and I have to do that. And I was like, okay, then why didn't you remove it? Why is it here? And I can kind of see that with the sitting, like, especially if you see NPCs sat down, like, oh, me and my character, I want to just go sit down for a minute. Like, it doesn't mean anything. You could just put the controller down and go away, but maybe you want to sit your character down as just a nice little role-playing thing. The question is, why is that here? And it's the thing I was saying about the rope. Well, if it's going to cost so much to do it and it's going to do all this, then why have it in the first place? Like, just remove the ladder. Nobody's going to know that there used to be a ladder here. You just got to think about those things.
I think games should bring back the board fidgets from Sonic the Hedgehog games. If you leave them alone too long, he starts getting bored. And eventually he just sits down and gives you a baleful look.
Yeah, taps his foot, looks at his watch.
And what a modern game should do is that if you keep them waiting too long, they should just interact with whatever they're closest to. So if they're standing in front of a chair, they'll sit on the chair and cross their arms and look impatient.
Yeah.
Or they'll start flicking with like a pull cord that's hanging from the ceiling.
I think
I like
the
that.
realism.
Okay.
Carry on, Mike. No, it's all good.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that I like Star Wars Outlaws has a few things like that, like a lean. You just lean against the wall or like lean against the bar. And
those
sometimes
things
like
make the world feel more solid to me, and it's like what Luigi's Mansion does really well. It's what a lot of these realism games do really well, is in the sense that they make the world feel real and your interactions with them feel solid. Like, oh, I can sit here, I can go up this ladder, I can throw an object at a wall and a painting will fall off, and something like that. It feels less of like an asset and more of an environment that you are interacting with. And as soon as you can't do that, where it feels like you should, your brain is immediately taken out. Like, why can't I go up this ladder?
yeah,
You just feel like you should be able to do it, right? So why isn't that a thing?
Alex Armstrong gives $5 and says, off topic, thoughts on snack games. Games around $1, last about an hour, and feel more like fun, short project stroke contest entries. Best example, Tory 3D. I think the success of that sort of model would depend on ease of use.
Mhm.
Like one thing one could easily take the piss out of, but which I've been sort of appreciating, is the new YouTube playables feature. Have you seen those?
No.
Yeah, I haven't done anything with them.
Where if you could watch a video, and if you get bored, you could just like put it on one half of your screen, and then put YouTube in another window, and play like just like a bubble pop game while you're watching the video.
Huh.
Interesting.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
a lot of them are just like shitty ports of mobile games. But I appreciate having something to fidget with while I'm watching YouTube videos. It makes a lot of sense
Trying
to me as a
keep your
concept.
second screen in YouTube. That's a
Yeah.
smart play from YouTube, honestly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Got to put Rusty's retirement there.
Yeah.
Fuck
yeah.
Yeah, I don't. This isn't a $1 game. This is an $8 game. I swear it was cheaper when I bought it a little while ago. But there's this game called Castaway that just came out a few weeks ago. That is very, very much. You click it and you see it's very much inspired by like Link's Awakening, like a top-down Zelda game. But the main campaign of the game is about 90 minutes long, and they say it's about 90 minutes. Like you land on this island, you lose 3 of your things, and you need to get 3 of your things from these sort of mini dungeons. And then there's like an endless tower mode that I didn't give a shit about. But like going in and being like, this is a 90-minute Zelda experience. I played it and I was like, this is delightful. Like I'm totally fine with if I go in knowing. Yeah. Like if someone was like, here's a shooter campaign that is 90 minutes long, I'd be like, okay, that sounds cool.
I honestly think I'd be more motivated to play a lot of games if I knew going in that they were short. I think the most famous example that people complained about a lot in the reviews, but I think it's one of its strengths, is like Katana Zero is extremely short, but is one of the most memorable like 2D experiences I've ever had. And if we get the general consumer base used to the fact that shorter games are coming out and devs aren't scared to make them because of like the refund policies and stuff like that. If I knew,
sucks.
Yeah, right. If I knew some of these games were short, as someone who, I play games for a living, so in my free time, I don't have a lot of time to put into games. If I knew there was a cool narrative game that's going to last about the amount of time of a movie, I'd be more motivated to buy it. But devs are just scared to say that or make them.
I love short games. I can get through it if I'm reviewing it, and then I've got the rest of the week free to piss about.
More short games.
Short game revolution. Make it happen.
Dr. Theo gives $2 and says, Halloween topic idea. Can horror be cozy? All right. Here's my take. Dredge. Dredge is a cozy horror game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
For me, the Dredge has a sort of secondary horror moment where you realize after you've been playing it for a while, holy shit, I'm part of this world now. This shit has become completely normal for me.
Yeah.
And there's no going back to boasting about the big tuna I caught to the dudes in the bait shop.
Yeah. I like that.
It's weird how it's when you realize you're comfortable now in this horrific world where you get that sort of second order horrific realization of Dredge.
Yeah, that's a good example. I'm trying to think of other Dredge is a great example. I don't know if like I didn't like it, so I didn't play a ton of it. But Cult of the Lamb, was that like?
Yeah,
I wouldn't call that horrific.
Yeah,
it's very like cartoony, exaggerated. I mean, I guess it's horrific if you'd call Binding of Isaac horrific.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is
for
just
me,
because
it's a little too cartoony and exaggerated to be horrific. It's more sort of, what's the word?
Like Tim Burton-y, like macabre almost, or
macabre would be a good word. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I get what you're saying. The difference there. Yeah.
I think
or themed in the sense of like Halloween decorations.
I was just about to say that whenever I think of Halloween, I don't necessarily think of, horror and scares. I think of things like the old Universal black and white horror movies. I think of what's it called? The Disney witch movie about witches in Salem.
Hocus Pocus.
I think of that warm orange full Salem, that kind of horror, and that to me, like, that's what I think of when I think of like Halloween, and it's very cozy and very nice. And not a lot of games emulate that, but I think Dredge is the best example, Yachts, of just like it is going for a horror atmosphere, but does feel quote unquote cozy. I think it's the best example for sure.
Did you ever watch Over the Garden Wall, the animated series from 5, 6?
No, never even
years
heard of
ago?
it.
No,
You should check it out. It's really it's like a short 10, 12 episode bite-sized thing that is that exact sort of cozy horror in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, really good.
Okay. Mikhail Hudon gives $5 and says, running through postmodern offices in Mirror's Edge shaped me as much as the meme-fueled over-animation in Sonic Adventure. Both are important.
Uh-huh.
All right, then. I guess you like going fast, Mikhail Hudon.
The only good games are the ones where you can go fast.
You
Well,
have a sprint
it's-
function. I'm not playing.
No.
I do like a traversal game with a good sense of flow and often, a fast game. Neon White, that's a good traversal-focused fast game.
Yeah,
Great
and
one.
both of those examples are games that are not going for realism in any sense. Like, yes, maybe the graphical fidelity of Mirror's Edge is going for a bit of realism, but the way it lays out and colors its
Yeah.
environments is completely designed to have flow in gameplay, which I think is its strength, rather than the fact
Yeah.
that you can see the main character's fucking knuckles or whatever.
I guess it's what you'd call hyper-real.
Yeah, I do that.
Unlike in Sonic Adventure, where you can see the main character, Sonic, fuck Knuckles. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, fuck.
Ox D gives $5 and says, say what you will about realistic graphics aging badly, but I'll never forget emerging from the sewer in Oblivion on my first genuine beefy gaming rig. Yeah, and go back and look at Oblivion now, and all the characters look like... What did I say in that one video? They look like fluorescent tube lights covered in prosciutto ham.
Yeah. Great way of describing them.
That is extremely evocative. Yeah, but that is the power, back then. I feel like we got those kind of moments at a relative frequent tick. And I think we just might have hit a point where it's diminishing returns or such incremental improvements that we just don't get it. Yeah.
That Breath of the Wild moment coming out to the Vista, you go,
Yeah.
yep, this was the thing I meant to see. Moving on.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Jackson Jewell comes back with $5 and says, water in Monster Hunter World always made me thirsty to look at. Ever since then, I judge water on its thirst factor.
Ooh, I like that. That's a
looking at
drink.
Well, looking at the food in Monster Hunter World made me hungry as well.
Oh my god!
When
Wait
you
there.
do the little
Wait there.
animation, the animation with the cat chef making
Cooking up stuff.
cooking up the massive steaks and the what the hell's that?
It's a watercolor painting of the cats from Monster Hunter World cooking a meal.
Incredible. See? It's
Lovely.
beautiful. Little palicos. Best looking food in games. Final Fantasy 15 had really good looking food. Nintendo does weirdly realistic food in some of their games. The new Mario Party that's coming out has like a steak cutting game where you need to cut a steak perfectly in half as possible, and the steak just looks so realistic and good
Cooking
in a
Mama?
fucking Mario
Oh my
Party
God.
game.
What is it with this? I mean, this was in Star Wars Outlaws as well.
Yeah.
Really realistic looking food that
People
the
dig it.
game focuses on and has a little quick time event sequence.
It's done in
you can
anime
eat
a
it.
whole bunch. Like people just respond to hyper
Yeah.
realistic food in media.
Yeah, and Miyazaki movies do that all the time. There's always food in
Yeah, I
Studio
guess
Ghibli movies.
I guess it's a universal thing that makes you go,
People
tasty.
respond to food. People eat multiple times a day. It's
That's
just a
probably
thing.
one of the few things where everyone who plays this game probably has a positive.
The
food
two
memory.
things that are immortal and can cross language barriers: food and music. That's it.
Big 2
And alcohol.
and
Yeah.
Big 3
And
wieners,
violence.
Big 4 and violence, Big 5. Okay, we named it.
Alex Armstrong gives $2 and says, pretty please read next super chat in Bane's voice. All right. The book the head at Uncle Hyde gives €2 and says, what's more important than realism is consistency.
It sounds like that's something he would actually say when he was getting ready to blow up Gotham.
Yes.
That is truly Gotham's reckoning. Okay,
Yeah,
we're on team consistency.
Yes. I say immersion, but it's all much for muchness, really.
Potato.
Snake in the Garden gives €2 and says, realistic farm game, no thanks. IRL farming is hard. Well,
See, that's-
people seem to like Farming Simulator.
Yeah.
But
They cut a lot of
if
corners,
it's
though.
realistic, wouldn't you have to wait months for your crops to grow?
Yeah, they cut the corners
yeah.
of waiting, which is a lot of farming.
Yeah. You'd have to get up at like 3 a.m. to start playing the game, and
Yeah. Tinker gives $2 and says, "Real life don't got jiggle physics. Real life bad." Well, real life can have jiggle physics as long as women don't wear bras.
Real life does have jiggle physics. They're just they're at 10 rather than turned up to like
Yeah.
50 like they are in games.
Mind you, I mean, I've seen fucking jiggle physics in some animes. They'll have women turn around and then their chest like continues animating for like 5 more seconds.
oh, that's disgusting. What are the exact names of those anime, and where can I find them to watch them so that I don't watch them?
You know,
What
I
are
was
they
thinking
called?
of a specific moment, but I forget what it was called. I mean, as I said in my old extra punctuation about the animes I like, I used to live with a huge anime fan in my bachelor days, and he would watch anime like every night. And the moment I think of when I talk about anime girls' boobies animating like 5 minutes, 5 additional seconds after the rest of them have finished turning around,
The
it was from one specific moment from an anime he was watching, but I forget what it was called. It was some generic giant robot shit. And I remember very clearly, as well as turning around, like a button flew off the lady's shirt.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
The moment that she turned around.
Disgusting. I agree with 249. Can someone give us the source so we can add them to our block list?
Do you guys ever have that do you know like when you're living with your parents and then it's always embarrassing to see like say nudity or sex scenes when you're watching something with your parents or something back in the day. I always had that thing when I was younger, I was living with my mother. I would watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and if anyone's seen JoJo's, it's not, well, it is incredibly sexualized, but towards the male end of things, they're incredibly masculine and flamboyant. But there is always one episode in every season of JoJo's that is like really weird and like kind of wrong. I won't give specific examples, but my mum, without fail, would always come in and want to talk to me when that nebulous episode was on.
I'm watching JoJo.
I'm like, I'm watching JoJo's. It isn't usually like this. Like the weird pedo orangutan that has a stand that is a ship. That's an episode. Weird ass
All right
show.
then. Witticism gives $5 and says, "What's the earliest example of realistic graphics that you remember blowing your mind?" Mine was probably Oblivion, one of the first 360 games I saw. Well, when I was a kid, I had a friend who had like a Commodore Amiga before everyone else did. I think I was still getting by with my Commodore 64. And I went round his house once and he played a game. It was like a point-and-click adventure game that was based on the film Nightbreed, the old Clive Barker film.
Oh.
And I was watching animations of that. There was like a scene of a dude being interrogated in an interrogation room and he was shaking his head and his hands were coming up. And I was like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. Video games are here forever. That's not the one, Eric. There were multiple Nightbreed games, and that's not the right one.
How to know?
Yes, that's the one with the map screen.
Well done, Eric. That was really quick.
Very, yeah. Just had a list of all the Nightbreeds. Yeah, I used to. I mean, pretty often in like the 90s, I'd have those. Like, I remember getting the Super Nintendo and having Mario World and small things like you climb on chain link fences and there's certain areas where you can punch and then you rotate to the far side of the fence. And so Mario's now on the opposite side of a fence. And like layering was a thing I just never remember seeing in games where it's like, oh, Mario's behind the fence. Like there's a third dimension to this world. Small things like that I felt all the time.
Toy Story. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 on the PS1. Like I remember as a kid just being blown away by like, I think you start in like Andy's room or something, and just being able to explore something that I was so familiar with and to feel the scale of it from the perspective of a toy blew my mind. And then going into the garden and jumping up the tree. Yeah, that blew me away.
Remember when the first Toy Story movie came out and blew everyone's minds?
Yes.
Look,
and now you look at it and go,
consider in retrospect the noticeable absence of fuzzy characters in Toy Story 1.
Yeah,
they didn't have that yet. Everything was just smooth.
Everything's smooth plastic.
Yep.
I mean, I remember when Monsters Inc. came out. They made a huge thing out of the fact that they were able to do furry characters now.
Sully was full fur and stuff
It
like
like
that.
almost feels like that was one of the reasons they like made the
It's-
movie was like, okay, look what we could, look how we can flex here with Sully.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the kind of you noticing the advancement in graphical fidelity in movies is still a thing. Like I know it was a while ago, but I remember watching Rogue One and seeing them rendering Peter Cushing and being like,
Oh,
holy shit.
Yeah, ghoulish, but yeah.
It's ghoulish, but like was impressive, and I was like, "This is impressive that they're even attempting to do this."
Yeah,
Maybe
I mean,
unethical that they're attempting to do this as well. But I remember being like,
Yeah.
"Holy shit!" And I've seen a lot of movies, like the latest Avatar movie. It's like the way they render water is objectively super impressive and really, really cool. But we don't really do that for games anymore. We don't see those big leaps.
Yeah, I mean, you could still tell Peter Cushing was a CG character in that film.
100%, yeah.
Very much skating down the sides of the uncanny valley.
Mm-hmm.
John Brooks gives £10 and says, "Put this in Yahtzee's Silent Hill 2 jar."
Oh,
There'll
that's
be a
gonna
lot of money
fill up.
going in the Silent Hill 2 jar pretty soon.
yeah, that jar is gonna overflow in the next month.
Hipster Doofus gives $10 and says, "Finally caught you guys live. Yahtzee, I am very much enjoying Existentially Challenged. Will there be a third Data Files book?" Yes, but I need to start writing it. I've got plans. I've made notes. I could probably start any day now. I just haven't because I haven't been asked.
That's like 90% of the work you already got done. Starting it, that's the easy thing. It's not true.
Yeah. Well begun is best begun, and best begun is nearly done.
Exactly.
Fuck.
Ryan Ryan Betts gives $5 and says, "IMO, more graphics doesn't need to constitute looking more realistic, e.g. the fan-made Unreal Engine Zelda remakes that still have the OG's art style."
Man, I always think those Unreal Engine remakes of a thing, of like Nintendo things, are so ugly.
I
They
agree.
always feel so lifeless to me. Like you see that with Zelda, you see that with like Mario, and I'm just like, what? I guess it's just missing an artist's eye. Like,
I agree. I'm currently making a game in Unreal Engine 5, and man, if you just plug shit into that default, it looks fucking gross.
it's Mario.
You need
thing.
an
Get it out of
artistic
here.
goal, and you need an objective, and you need to tweak.
Yeah.
And if you don't, they all just look the same and lifeless. And it's a shame. It's a huge shame.
Isn't that true of real life though?
Oh my god.
Photographs very easily look like shit.
That is true.
It's true.
That is true.
A superb owner gives $2 and says, "I'm late. Did Marty bring up Jacob Geller's video?" Somebody did. A superb
Someone
owner.
did.
Marty didn't.
And then several of us were like, "Oh, that was a good video," and I just
Yeah.
linked it here. Everyone should watch that video. Good thumbnail too.
SPScore 2000 gives €5 and says, "How authentic was the British dude in Crisis Warhead?" As authentic as any British character who just speaks in a thick Cockney accent the whole time. I mean, it wasn't Dick Van Dyke.
Did he
but,
at any point say apples and pears?
No,
Better
it
off.
wasn't that bad. I
Fuck,
mean, he
not
referred
realistic.
to every single. I mean, I remember the one thing I remember about that character is that at one point in Crisis 1, he refers to a female character as Love, and the female character in question gets offended. And I was just thinking, that's just how British Cockney men talk.
Yeah, all right, love. Yeah,
Yeah. All right, love. It's just like a verbal tick.
darling. Yeah,
Don't hypersensitive much.
verbal tick. Like,
Leave
like Cockney people are disabled.
Yes. Leave the poor Cockney man alone.
What's the most realistic portrayal of someone from a specific nation in a game? Is it what the fuck was the name of that horror game on the oil rig from like 2 months ago?
Oh, the
that was-
Scottish page.
That was made by British people. That's just. I mean, you're asking what's the best portrayal of someone made by someone who isn't from the country that person's from.
Oh, I guess that's what I'm asking, which probably doesn't count.
I don't know.
I mean,
I
a
just
bunch
love
of
it when
Brits.
people do regional accents really well. Like I was playing recently the excavation of Hobbs Barrow, and like people have really good like kind of northern accents. And I always appreciate that. I also really appreciate it, well, kind of, when a lot of games and or media use English dialect as like fantasy like hobbits always sound like they're from Devon or like the
Yeah,
south
hobbits are from Devon, orcs are from South London.
Yeah,
Peasants are
dwarves are
from
Scottish or northern.
peasants these days are mostly from the north of England. I've noticed.
Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
we can blame Game of Thrones for that one.
yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Thrones. Yeah, it is funny that there's a new Ridley Scott's making a new Gladiator movie that's coming out in November.
Oh, is that
And,
Gladiator too?
Yeah, Gladiator 2. And Denzel Washington is in it. And in the trailer, he just sounds like Denzel Washington in like anything. And people are like, why doesn't he have a British accent? I'm like, this is a fucking Gladiator movie. Like, just because, like, yeah, just like no one knows. Like,
They shouldn't be speaking English, you fucking moron.
him having just like his normal speaking voice is just as accurate as Game of Thronesing everything, where everyone just has the flourishy, British accent.
Just Americans understand the British accent as the history accent.
Yeah.
If it's happening in history, they have to have British accents.
British.
Like in 300.
Yeah. God.
Hunter Road gives $5. Says, can't think of anything clever to add. Good, consistent aesthetic is better than hyper-realism. Keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Yes.
Consistency is king.
And then Will Cooling gives $5 and says, what doesn't have realism is a long video by some deluded misanthrope chasing fake phantoms, but enough about the latest RLM video. Keep rocking it, guys.
Who's a fake phantom?
Yeah, did you see the latest? Did you see the latest Red Letter Media video?
The paranormal one.
Yeah, they're going to go on a ghost hunt, apparently.
I was watching that
cool.
while I was writing today. Yeah, it seems like Mike is just indulging his fantasies and tracking.
Yeah,
Rich
I'm sure the general,
Jay.
I'm sure the general audience is a bit put off, but let a man have his passions.
Yeah.
Are they gonna go on a ghost hunt in Milwaukee? Because there are some spooky places.
No, they went to somewhere in. Oh, yeah, help me out, state man. It's like just to the southwest
Illinois.
of Wisconsin.
Iowa.
Iowa, somewhere in Iowa.
Yeah.
The Axe Murder House or something.
Great. Yes, the Axe Murder House. Iowa is the face of the chef.
There we go. See, Yachts knows. And for anyone who doesn't know, boy, can you learn all of this information if you become a $10 patron and check out Yachts' video.
Become a $10 Patreon and watch a weird video I made for no particular reason in which I explained how I remember all the locations of every US state. And just one of many wonderful things you can see as a Patreon supporter.
Oh, God. What a video.
Yes, anyway. Fox D gives $5 and says, AAA gaming peaked in the PS3 360 era. Skyrim, Red Dead Redemption 1, Mass Effect. Indie gaming's peak is still fully in front of it as indie tools get more powerful. That was a pretty good time for indie gaming as well, with the whole Xbox Live Summer of Arcade. Where there were some of like the most famous indie games in indie gaming history were highlighted through that method. Limbo, that was one of those.
Braid, Meat Boy, Bastion.
Braid, Meat Boy, Bastion.
Castle Crashers.
Yes. Remember when things used to be nice? Remember when we used to have nice things?
I do. Yeah. At least we have Astro.
Because you know what the Summer of Arcade was? It was a curated bunch of indie games.
Yeah, I was about to say something that sounds a little bit gatekeepy, so I might. No, it's not. So the tools are getting better, allowing a wider array of people to have access to make games, which is beautiful. But that does also mean that back in the day, the people who were making these indie games were devs that had been in the industry for 10, 15 years who wanted to go make something independent, right? So there was a certain level of quality to their work, and for them to get funding and to actually be made. But now, people can just asset flip, churn shit out, and not have to.
Yes, and even the non-asset flip shit. There's a little part of me that dies a little inside every time I see a new indie game come onto the communal Steam account, and I see it's a pixel art roguelike platformer, or a pixel art Souls-like Metroidvania.
Yeah, for sure.
Tinker gives $5 and says, I've always been fond of the rice farming segments in Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. It gave me pretty good lesson on how rice is cultivated.
Yeah, that's a fun. That's one of those games that's like half farming and then half like 2D hack and slash them up
So
levels.
instead of rope the game, it's rice the game.
Look at that.
I
Was there any mochi making?
I didn't play
I
it far
hope so.
enough. There's got to be mochi making. Yeah, absolutely.
Why isn't
I-
that a game? Making mochi
Yeah,
looks like
so-
such an
someone-
elastic, fun experience. Like,
Someone absolutely needs to make a mochi making game. I'm sure there probably is one. There's probably like a micro game in one of the WarioWare games where you make
Yeah.
mochi.
Yeah.
You know, you make mochi, chat, where you just put some wet rice in a barrel and then hammer it a million times
We love wet
with
rice.
a great big sledgehammer.
multiple. Rhythm, it'd be a great rhythm game. I'd dig it.
Longshanks gives $5 and says, "Hey Yahtzee, do you have any more updates for Starstruck Vagabond, big or small?" I'm not gonna say never, but I am probably gonna move to new projects pretty soon. I think it's about as functional and intact as it's gonna be for a while. Good time to buy it, incidentally.
Ooh.
It's
get it.
probably gonna be fine now. Got rid of some like pesky persistent crash bugs in the last update, and now I'm just gonna find another project to get really passionate about.
And
Okay.
I've heard
Check it out.
about some of Yachtzee's new projects that he has in mind, and they're exciting.
Yes.
I like them.
I've bounced a few off Jay as a indie game dev colleague, and he was just being a sounding board. So yeah, I've got ideas. It's just trying to pick one to go with.
Mm-hmm.
BS Marsh gives $5 and says, "Here's a small dono for the excellent Parasite Eve archive video. I played it back when it came out, and it was great."
Hey, thanks, Beast March. Appreciate it. Here's second episode of the archive. Went up this morning. Javed, as always, did a phenomenal job on the edit. Through the link in there, all about Parasite Eve and sort of how this represented SquareSoft at their creative apex, I would say.
What a great series, by the way, Marty. It's really strong.
I really like.
I'm proud of you and Javed for making it. I think it's super unique.
I like taking these weird trips down memory lane.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to be too weeby.
The next one is Peter Jackson's King Kong, the movie, the game by Ubisoft Montpellier.
Well, that's the opposite of weeb.
Now you're like, you gotta lean back into
What is the complete opposite of weeb? Peter Jackson's King Kong, the video
French.
game.
Well, instead of being a game about a small, fragile schoolgirl with a very short skirt, it's about a giant, hairy monkey that doesn't wear anything at all.
I don't know. Jack Driscoll can complain about a bunch of stuff a lot. He's pretty fragile.
Anyway, Fungus Finder gives $2 and says Louisiana is a boot because we're a muddy swamp. Or maybe you could just go with Louisiana is the one state shaped like its first letter.
Oh.
Oh. Interesting.
Think about it. I mean,
There's
I
gotta
guess
be another
Ohio,
state that
you could probably get
Yeah,
away
it's
with
kinda
using
circular.
Ohio as an O.
Yeah.
Ohio is the state that's holding Pennsylvania.
In a tender embrace.
Yes. Well, holding it out like it's a big pencil. So we can draw all over New York. Anyway, SVS Guru 2000 gives €5. It says, how much asset flipping is okay to do? Do you need to model your own trees, rocks, common animals, or office furniture? I wouldn't say so, but I think you got to do the bare minimum to make it consistent with your art style.
Speed Tree is the best example of this. I see Eric's got my asset flipping video up. If you want to go see someone asset flip a game in real time, me and Ludo did that to varying degrees of success. Speed Tree is a program used by all of your favorite games to create foliage. They use systems to kind of birth trees and generate them, and then you use that to populate in your environments. That could be considered asset flipping. But it's just taking an extremely tedious process and streamlining it, right? Not necessarily ripping models from online and putting them in and passing them off as your own.
Trees are nature's procedural generation. Where's the next branch going to go? You don't know. It's random.
Also, just use the rocks from Hellblade. They're the best rocks. You're not going to make a better rock.
Yeah, pretty good rocks. No mistake. But wait, those rocks are basalt. What if I wanted granite?
Oh yeah,
You've
Granite
definitely
doesn't
reached the
actually-
limit of my rock knowledge. I have no more rock knowledge.
Tommy Deonoth's Archives gives $5 and says, Realism may be ruining gaming, but that doesn't mean stylized graphics are always better. Looking at you, bland diamond and snoozing pearl.
No, I agree. Yes,
Someone-
there's nothing.
Someone's got an axe to grind. I think the problem with those games is more a lack of energy in the games rather than the choice of stylization.
Mm,
Yeah, you're a pretty big Pokemon fan, right?
yeah, I've
What's
I owned them all. This is weird. I own them all, and every time one comes out, I buy both of them.
Oh yeah,
But
I bring it
wouldn't
up
consider
often.
myself a huge Pokemon fan. It's
That's
weird.
mad.
What would you say was the last Pokemon game that was visually interesting?
uh,
Like
Pokemon
a
Yellow.
DS one? Like oh wow, we're going that far back. Okay. Yeah.
Colosseum. I really liked Colosseum when it came out.
Yeah,
I just think they've progressively got worse, but I think a lot of the reason for that is because Game Freak is a very incestuous company. Like,
yeah, and they don't need to put the effort in. They don't need to put the effort in. It's fucking Pokemon. You assholes going to buy it?
Yeah,
Just
but that's the frustration, right? Like everyone was so excited for Scarlet and Violet or Arceus, the first 3D rendition and stuff. People were so hyped, including me. I was like, this is where Pokemon should be going. But it ran. We streamed it, Marty, I believe. Like it ran like shit. It looked like shit. And because, as Yahtzee said, you'll buy it. They don't put the effort in or do not have the skills necessary to make it actually look good and run well on the Switch, and people just make excuses for it. And even as someone who buys them and enjoys them, that series has a lot of growing to do. I just hope they'll actually do it.
Yeah, you can't blame the Switch when first party games like Luigi's Mansion and Splatoon and Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder
Tears of the Kingdom
look as good as they do.
Yeah, frame rate notwithstanding, but never mind.
It is. I'm replaying the Link's Awakening remake, and it is crazy to me that the frame rate tanks in that game. And I'm like, have you guys not just fixed this? Like the frame rate tanks when you go to the swamp, and I'm like, why is a top-down Zelda game chugging?
Tinker gives $5 and says, adding to my previous chat, what about realism for education purposes? I know of a friend who used PC Builder Simulator to learn how to build his PC.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If that's what you want.
It's great.
I mean, all this realistic graphics has its place in non-gaming sectors, like for making CG movies, for making ultra realistic 3D models for all illustration and graphical purposes across the board. We don't have to. It doesn't have to exist within the interactive gameplay field as well.
There was for a couple of Assassin's Creed games, Ubisoft did those like museum modes almost, or discovery modes, or whatever it was, where there was like, remember that they like stripped away the combat and objectives and anything, and you could just like wander around the pyramids and learn about them, which is neat, I guess. I don't know like how effective it was, but shrug.
I used to like the museum aspect of Assassin's Creed games, but the way I thought of that was there'd be like an in-game database and glossary, and every time you discovered a new thing, you could go into the database and it would tell you a little interesting fact, usually like narrated by fucking Danny Wallace's character in like Assassin's Creed 2.
Yeah,
but then from certain games onwards, they just stopped doing that. I think it was from Origins onwards, because up until that point, when they ended it with Syndicate, Assassin's Creed had been more sort of Magic School Bus explorations of historical periods. But then from Origins onwards, they became more RPG focused, so they stopped doing the educational thing.
Magic School Bus, that's a good comp.
That's a great way of describing it,
Yeah.
Well, it was at its worst in Syndicate, because, you'd be walking down a street and fucking Charles Dickens would bump into you.
Hello, I am Charles Dickens.
And the main character would go, oh my god! It'd be like a fucking celebrity appearance in The Simpsons. They'd be like, oh my god, it's the famous Charles Dickens. What are you doing here, Charles Dickens? Oh, I'm having such trouble writing these famous books that I write. I'm being stopped by these Templars. Could you stab them in the throat for me? Can do, the famous Charles Dickens. But I hope you don't have great expectations for my performance. And oh, that gives me an idea.
He asks the brother and sister how it went, and one of them says it was the best of times, and the other one says it was the worst of times. And he's like,
Oh, we did that at school.
look at us. We did it.
We did it.
We're done.
That was
We
the
can go
last
home.
super chat. We're
We can
done
go home.
complaining about realism
Oh
for
my
now, at
God.
least. Guess we'll wrap things up then. Thanks for watching, stroke listening to the Windbreakers podcast. Let us know in the comments how you feel about realistic games. Call to action, call to action. And don't forget to subscribe if you'd always like to be informed when we've got new videos up on the Second Wind channel. Call to action, call to action. And hey, leave a like. It doesn't take much effort, and it shows that we're doing the right thing. The call to action, call to action. Don't forget to watch Fully Ramblematic this week. Call to action, call to action. It's going to be on the subject of Space Marine 2, which is a popular game. Plug. And then that's going to have my Yahtzee Tries stream. You should all come to that and find what I'm going to be playing this week. Call to action, call to action. Who's next? Jay, plug your stuff.
Design Delve that is coming out this week on Concord, being, in my opinion, the biggest failure in gaming history. And I'll go over the evidence as such. And yeah, we just had a dev heads, with a Boubacar, which was really, really fun. And a bunch of other podcasts and streams that I was on. And other than that, yeah, I'm going to be on a few streams later in the week, I believe. So keep an eye out for that. Call to action, and check out our Patreon, the biggest call to action. That's how we mainly fund all of this bullshit. So if you want to help keep this bullshit alive.
I know it's easy to to stop listening when people say, please subscribe to the Patreon, but it really is the thing that keeps us going. So if you enjoy the content we make, if you've enjoyed listening to us today, all we ask is that you think about it. It could be as little as $1 a month, and you'll be doing your part to keep us going. Call to action, call to action.
So
that
yeah,
was beautiful.
Cool
It was beautiful and smooth. I didn't even
that's
realize.
all my calls. Marty, take over.
Yes.
Do some calls.
I didn't even realize action was being called. Yeah, as we mentioned, a new episode of Archive went up just a few hours ago on Parasite Eve. Check that out. Hidden Gems will be returning this evening at 6 p.m. Central. They will be playing a relatively new indie game called Deathbound. It has mixed reviews. Recent reviews are mixed. All reviews are mostly positive. So
must have been an update that people didn't like.
The normal Casey, Jesse, and Jess crew will be playing that, and yeah, we just got a banger week. Tomorrow we'll be back for the Rewind podcast. Darren will be back. We'll be chatting about Beetlejuice and some other garbage. The backdrop. Darren's got a wonderful backdrop going up tomorrow that Omar edited on the life and the impact of James Earl Jones in the wake of his passing last week. So that's a wonderful video. All of Yahtzee stuff on Wednesday. Jack and I are gonna be finishing Elden Ring on Thursday, and just good stuff. All sorts of special stuff.
Jack will never finish playing Elden Ring, and I think we all realize that.
No. But in theory, this is gonna be our last stream. Whether he could beat the boss of Shadow of the Erd Tree or not, he's going to attempt on Thursday.
Oh yes. And of course, don't forget Adventure is Nigh on Saturday. We're still pumping out the remastered Season 2. Things are really hotting up now.
Ooh, hachi machi.
In last week's episode, my character almost died.
Oh no!
After getting stabbed by a poo-covered worm.
Happens to the best of us.
But did I survive? Guess you'll find out next week. Yes. Call to action. Etc.
And whatnot.
Guess we'll go then. Now I'm going to call myself to action in that I'm going to have some lunch.
Perfect. Greatest call to action.
Oh,
thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye, guys.